बस तुम
वो प्ले कर कैसा
كلمني ولياضة كريت كروية إذا سكي ولا صلا
إلياس ليرود
ويا شميت
From a president who insists without evidence the election was stolen from him, pressure on a top election official to find votes to help him overturn a result. The audio of the hour-long call from the Oval Office to Georgia's Secretary of State was first obtained by the Washington Post and captures Donald Trump even warning of vague legal consequences if he didn't do something.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
It's a move that may create legal problems for the president. He's pressuring an elected official to change the result of an election already certified by the state. President Trump claimed again without evidence he'd won Georgia by hundreds of thousands of votes. He didn't. The state went for Biden.
Moving on, at the time of increasing scrutiny of Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba, the absence of its billionaire promoter from public space, Jack Ma, is creating headlines around the world. And one of China's unusually vocal and outspoken tycoons, Jack Ma, has reportedly not been seen in public for several weeks now. Recently, Jack Ma was replaced by another Alibaba executive after he failed to appear for the filming of his own talent show, Africa's Business Heroes. Ma had earlier gone on to publicly criticize the Chinese regulators, calling the country's banks pawn shops. He also called for reform of a system that allegedly stifled any business innovation. Reports say that Jack Ma's recent speeches have angered the Chinese government, which views his criticism as an attack on the authority of the Communist Party.
Julian Assange is going to be facing a British court today that will decide if the WikiLeaks founder should be extradited to the United States to face espionage charges. The 49-year-old Australian is accused of illegally hacking into US government websites and also leaking documents on Iraq and Afghanistan wars and publishing content on diplomatic cables in 2010. Remember, around the world, Julian Assange was at that time hailed as a champion of free speech, someone who exposed the American excesses in the wars that it was carrying out in Iraq and Afghanistan. Assange is currently held at the maximum security Belmarsh prison in southeast of London. A grand jury in the US state of Virginia has indicted him under the Espionage Act on 17 counts for soliciting, gathering, publishing classified documents in 2010.
Five years after a massive refugee influx, Germany could now send Syrians back to their war-ravaged homeland, especially those it deems a security threat.
Germany must not be a safe haven for dangerous persons or serious criminals. Those who commit crimes or pursue terrorist aims to do serious harm to our state and our population should and will have to leave our country.
Last month, lawmakers decided to end a freeze on deportations of Syrians that had been in place since 2012. Courts can now decide on a case-by-case basis whether to deport offenders. Germany took in nearly 1.5 million refugees since 2015, most of them fleeing the Syrian conflict. 90 Syrian nationals in Germany are currently classified as a security threat.
Villagers in western Niger gather to pray in the wake of one of the deadliest days in their nation's recent history. These graves are just 2 days old. The Prime Minister of Niger flew in to see the devastation for himself. Niger's interior minister says the villages were attacked on Saturday after locals killed 2 fighters from an unknown group, but no one has claimed responsibility for these attacks. Niger has endured a series of attacks by groups including Nigeria-based Boko Haram, ISIL, and Al-Qaeda. Thousands of people have been killed and hundreds of thousands displaced, despite the presence of thousands of regional and international troops.
The U.S. government is considering giving some people half the dose of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine in order to speed vaccinations, a federal official said on Sunday. Monsef Slaoui, head of Operation Warp Speed, the federal vaccine program, said on CBS's Face the Nation that officials were in talks with Moderna and the Food and Drug Administration about the idea. Moderna's vaccine requires 2 injections. That would mean people aged 18 to 55 would receive half the current quantity in each of the first and second doses. Slaoui said, quote, "We know it induces identical immune response," noting that ultimately it would be up to the FDA to make such a decision. Moderna and the FDA could not immediately be reached for comment.
A month into its 3rd coronavirus wave, Tokyo may soon return to a state of emergency this week, throwing more doubt on whether Japan can host the Olympic Games this year. That's according to Japanese leader Yoshihide Suga on Monday, as the country faces record numbers of new cases.
The number of people going out in the Tokyo area didn't go down in December. Neither did the number of cases over the New Year holiday. I'm very concerned with these rising case numbers and felt the need to send out a stronger message.
Japan saw 4,500 cases on December 31st, a record for the country, and almost half were in the greater Tokyo area. While it's seen nearly 250,000 cases, Japan's never gone under a rigid lockdown seen elsewhere. Instead, the Prime Minister before Suga, Shinzo Abe, declared a state of emergency last spring that shut down schools and non-essential businesses for over a month.
The African nations at the center of a spat over the controversial dam have resumed talks. Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan reopened their years-long negotiations over an Ethiopian dam construction on the Blue Nile River. The fresh round of virtual talks were held in the presence of South African officials as well as other international observers as well. South Africa is the current head of the African Union's rotating council. The 3 countries have held multiple rounds of talks since Ethiopia broke ground on the project in 2011. But so far, they have failed to produce an agreement on the filing and operation of this vast reservoir behind the tall dam. One of the observers of the dam project, the European Union, has now welcomed the talks in a statement which says, and I quote, "The talks offer an important opportunity for progress towards a deal. All the parties should show the political will to engage in this round of talks in a constructive and open-minded spirit."
German police spent Sunday chasing day trippers off the slopes of a closed ski resort after hundreds of people flocked to Winterberg east of Düsseldorf, defying appeals from authorities to stay home. Winterberg has seen a rush of thousands in recent days, leading to traffic jams and overcrowded parking lots. Earlier in the day, police had sought to block access to the town, but spokesman Sebastian Held said the district's interconnected slopes, covering thousands of square miles, had posed a challenge when trying to enforce Germany's strict regulations.
Hundreds of Tibetans in exile have been voting to choose a new political leader. The election took place in India's northern city of Dharamsala, which is home to Tibet's government in exile. Voters wore masks as a COVID precaution as they cast their ballots during the first round of the election. One of them was Lobsang Sangay, who's finishing his second and final term as the Tibetan leader. This is the first phase of voting to narrow down presidential candidates to 2. The second phase will take place in April. The Dalai Lama, the Tibetans' exiled spiritual leader, and his followers have been living in Dharamsala since they fled Tibet after a failed 1959 uprising against Chinese rule. Beijing, which has ruled the mountainous region since 1951, refuses to recognise it as an independent nation, claiming that Tibet has been part of its territory since the 13th century.